Forrester talks about companies spending on average $135,262, just to be exact, annually on sales enablement programs. But very few of them really succeed or live up to their potential. What advice do you have?
Imagine trying to teach people how to swim by having them watch a YouTube video of an Olympics level athlete swimming, right? And make them watch it 3,000 times. And once they've watched it, put them in water for the first time in their lives with nobody else in the room. Like, they're probably going to get into some difficulty, right? And if they survive that difficulty, then no way they're going to get back in that water again.
I don't mean to disagree with you. You're right in a way that a lot of methodologies are all about how do we sell people and how do we have sales techniques. Our point of view is, and maybe it's just a 1% pivot, is no one freaking wants to be sold.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm Carlos Noche, and I'm joined by my always popular podcast partner, Lisa Schneider. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how's it going today, Carlos?
It's going great. It's a great ending to a great week, and it's a sunny day, so I'm looking forward to it. Today, we have another great episode with an amazing guest, and the topic is how and why organizations invest huge amounts in areas designed to really drive growth, but fail to ever, realize their potential. And we're also going to, mix in how we might be able to leverage today's AI tools to really make a difference.
And to help us out with that today, we have one of the experts himself, James Pursey. James is the co-founder and CEO of Replicate Labs, who are tackling the challenge that buyer personas are constantly changing and therefore always outdated. They create dynamic, real-time buyer personas that continuously evolve as the market shifts. By using data from LinkedIn, podcast calls, emails, they ensure sales teams always have the most current and accurate information about their target buyers. And they've got some really exciting new announcements that just came out last week. Again, when this is released, it'll be like, they have another new exciting thing coming out because it moves at the speed of light. But James, thank you so much for taking the time today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm just gonna transcribe everything you just said and put it on my website, I think. But
cool. I can share this with you. Yeah.
As your agent, there is a small fee. No, kidding. James, we start our podcast the same way every single time. What is something that you're passionate about these days that those that primarily only know you through work might be surprised to know about you?
I'm obsessed with cycling. I got really into. I don't know if it's like just because I got to a certain age and Lycra just seemed like a good idea, but I think it's. I got into road cycling during COVID because it allowed me to go outside, and then I had 2 young children, so I never liked like watching the sport or anything. But now that I can't actually go out, I've become a big cycling fan. I just watched the Tour de France a few weeks ago. I bizarrely know like everything there is to know about it. So there you go. Current interest.
Love it.
Hey, I love it. Same thing happened to me, James. Not that I didn't get into road cycling, but I did get into cycling for the exact same reason during the exact same time. And yeah, now it's just like, yeah, love it. I don't know. Maybe it is an age thing. It's like you hit a certain age, it's like, there it goes. The cycling kicks in.
Literally.
But yeah, perfect. Let's talk a little bit more about you and your professional career. You've had so many different roles. You've worked in marketing, client services, and across, of course, like enablement, and now, of course, with co-founder of Replicate Labs and working on the forefront of the AI space. So, can you share some of the highlights of like what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, my CV does look a little bit wild when you look at it on paper, but there is a common theme, which is I like solving problems. And for me, the more impossible and the harder it looks, the more I'm kind of drawn to it. So I started out, my first kind of real job, I guess, was working for a company that was disrupting the way people buy cars. Because 15 years ago, that was still almost exclusively that you go in and you don't know the true value of it, and you don't know if you're being given a good deal or not, right? And you can only buy locally and all that kind of stuff. So I was an early employee at a company that was trying to change that, which kind of blew up and became quite successful over time. Don't drive, had no interest in cars, right? Couldn't have named 5 cars to you, but was really motivated by the problem that they were trying to solve, right? And the core change. Um, and then I joined a small startup called SimilarWeb, which was trying to change the way people made decisions about online marketing, right? Like the classic playbook was, I'm going to go and spend some money, learn what happened from it, and then spend some money and do it slightly differently and A/B test my way to success. And they were one of the first businesses that would tell you what everybody else was doing so that you could leverage everyone else's experiments and make faster, smarter decisions. I joined that as a small business, and that blew up to this 1,500 person public business, super successful. And I spent almost a decade there. And I kept, as the business grew, it ran into scale problems, challenges, right? Buyer stuff changed, they had different products. So whenever they had an issue where their current infrastructure couldn't handle it, I would pop up and build a new team, build a new function. So my resume looks crazy because it's solution engineering and then sales and then a product owner and then customer success and product support. But it was really like the need of the business at the time. And I know this is long-winded, but I'm getting to the point. Eventually, we needed an enablement function. And I didn't know that much about enablement, but I ran a large client training team. We built this team out, and I was fascinated by the concept of materially changing the way a large group of people go to market, and not just the impact on them, but the impact on the buyer as a result. And then I was constantly frustrated by the fact that it didn't really work. And had this kind of realization that it's a very large industry where everyone in it kind of knows that, right? But like there's limitations to it. Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule. But yeah, I like solving challenges. I've never found a bigger one than a whole industry that is kind of not reaching its full potential, where everybody knows it but can't solve for it. Where if you solve for the problem, the business upside is like astronomical. Like imagine if sales reps actually did what they were asked to do. And that was super motivating. So yeah, that's what I left and started trying to figure out really.
Oh, Carlos, you're muted. You look great though. Listeners might prefer you this way.
Ouch, that hurt. That hurt my little feeling. So, James, it's awesome. I'm excited about today's topic because I think it's a hot topic and it goes right what we just talked about. In fact, thanks to my amazing podcast partner, do the little research for me, organizations make large investments in this area. Forrester talks about companies spending on average $135,262, just to be exact, annually on sales enablement programs. But as you just said firsthand, very few of them really succeed or live up to their potential. What advice do you have, or how does, Replicate Labs actually help with that?
So I'll try and not give another 5-minute answer. I think that there's 2 reasons that this happens. One is internal, right? We commissioned this enormous survey that really focused on like internal alignment and structure and measurement, all that kind of stuff between reps, managers, leaders, and enablers, right? So the whole kind of ecosystem that are responsible for change. And kind of the main thing that it highlights is that like all of them have completely different ideas of what their jobs are, how they're meant to work together, how they're meant to do training and stuff. So like internal alignment is a really big factor. And then for me, the best way I can boil it down is people buy software or buy services or buy methodologies in order to achieve a goal. And seemingly the second they buy it, they completely forget what that goal was. Right. And it's especially true with software. You buy software in order to, I don't know, make everyone better coaches. And then you renew the software 12 months later because the vendor tells you that people used it, right? Like the gap's pretty obvious there. Like, and part of this is the software company's fault, right? And they're not backing into it and like disclosing that information, probably because it's not very good. But a lot of it, I think, is the business, just like they forget their reason for doing things. When it comes to, training and services, you think about rolling out a methodology, right? Like you probably do it for a very specific reason, right? Like you're underperforming your conversion of lead to pipeline to revenue, for example, right? But then very quickly it becomes, well, people aren't saying these exact phrases and following this, and we're going to go and force them through the CRM, right? And it very quickly moves from like this outcome orientated common thing that everybody agrees to this weird, like crack the whip type thing that like nobody ever is going to respond well to. So I think that those are the two kind of main buckets, right? Internal alignment, and then forgetting the reason you do it in the first place.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I just had an experience with a company that when I was trying to probe for like the measurable metrics around why they were working with us for training, the answer was, well, I just want them to be more confident having conversations with executives. And I'm like, I want that too. That, yeah, definitely want to do that. I just also want to figure out how we're going to measure that.
Yeah.
Because confidence, it's like, okay, and then how do we say, yes, we achieved our goal, they are more confident, you know? So yeah, it is challenging, I think. And that was an enablement team I was talking to. And so when you think about the fact that the budget that they just spent on a training where they're just like, well, we just want them to be more confident. And I'm like, how are you justifying this spend? Like, in my experience, I was a serial startup person throughout my career, so my budgets were extremely limited, if non-existent. And if there wasn't a measurable justification for a spend, there was no way I was going to get anything done. So, and if I couldn't prove it when that renewal came up beyond, like you say, the vendor saying, "Oh, people use this," like that would never have flown past my finance team. So yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of we always say hope is not a strategy, but there's a lot of like hope
Yeah.
this is working.
And like the worst thing, in my opinion, so apologies if this is part of what you encourage people to do, is the most common way that enablement teams will measure is surveys. It's still the number. It's reflected, ironically. I appreciate the irony in the survey that we did about how you measure things, but it's the number one way that you measure sales training effectiveness. And even worse than using a survey in general is the standard way of doing it is that you ask two questions. How did you feel about topic X before the training? And how did you feel about it after the training? Right. And you're probably friends with everyone that you've sent it to. So you go and execute a training session, right? You send this survey out, you proudly hit the button, you get a couple hundred results back that tell you you're amazing, right? Like we asked people with enablers what the reaction is. They said it's 98% positive, right? So everyone goes, this was amazing. They say really over the top things. Like we were told once that a training we did was going to change someone's life. And then they walk away. And then they might send another survey in 3 months that says they're using it. And of course, at that stage, the reps are like, of course I'm using it, right? Don't watch my tools, but of course I'm using it. And then someone at ops will look at win rate 6 months down the line and go, win rate went up, so yay, it was because of the training. But if win rate went down, or there's too many other factors. So like, there's just no like accountability. And like the company I worked at before was similar. We rolled out a sales training program, and up until the point of delivery, it's amazing, right? And then as soon as the business was left alone, the sales training company left, it just becomes, oh, well, we put the fields in the CRM, right? And like, there's just, it all just kind of falls off a cliff. When ultimately, regardless of technology, right? And you ask how we help, right? But sales is only really about understanding who you're talking to and what they care about. And then learning is about practicing and getting feedback. So if you can tick those 3 boxes, I know who I'm talking to and what they care about, I can go and practice and I can get feedback and coaching that actually helps me get better. And you do that trio in a loop, then you're going to learn. And what's disheartening is quite a lot of people know that. And yet it's surveys and CRM validation that is the path that people take.
So James, I got good news for you. We're not just trying to get 5 stars. You were awesome. In fact, that's one of the points I make at the workshop. Hey, if you all want to feel good and have a great survey at the end, I'll just be real kind to you. We'll have some laughs. You give me a 5 at the end. We'll say this was a huge success. Problem, you're not going to change any of your behaviors after you leave here. So what Lisa and I, really talk about is, hey, even leading into the training, how do you get leadership involved? And that's one of the things, like when we talk about enablement, they go, hey, we're leading the program. Awesome. When are we going to get the leaders involved? Because you're not the one that's asking the questions every day around every deal. You're not leading sales. And if you're trying to improve sales or customer success or whatever that go-to-market function is, you got to get people that want to drive a behavioral change in folks. Now, there's tools that help, and we can dive a little deeper into that, but you also still need to take that ownership and responsibility about this. So we're big on, we got to start with leaders, what outcomes they want, what behaviors they want to change, what's working, what's not. Then you do this great training in the middle and everybody's thumbs up. And I have a standard line, James. And it's like at the end of the workshop, they're going to look at Lisa and I go, that was amazing. Awesome. And then they're going to swivel in their chair and look at you in the eye and go, what aspect of this are you really going to make me do? And if you flinch, you might as well just burn the money up. Right? So kind of my question back to you is kind of like, hey, what does Replicate Labs and what you guys do, how does it help in really making whatever the training is actually something they will use and get comfortable with? Because let's face it, I think one of the biggest reasons people stop doing something is they get, it's like, it sounded good, but then I tried on my call, my manager didn't help me. I was all alone and it didn't go as good as I thought. So that was a negative experience. I'm going to go back to my comfort. Would you like to see a demo?
Yeah. So I'm trying to not make it like pitchy. So I love an analogy, right? So let's try this. And I've used this before, but it was a couple of years ago. So I'll try and remember my own analogy. Learning to swim. I actually, despite being brought up by the seaside, did not learn to swim until I was 18 years old. And I think that sales training quite often is like trying to teach, like the whole kind of dynamic is imagine trying to teach people how to swim by having them watch a YouTube video of an Olympics level athlete swimming, right? And make them watch it 3,000 times. And once they've watched it, put them in water for the first time in their life with nobody else in the room. Like they're probably going to get into some difficulty, right? And if they survive that difficulty, which again, let's remember we're talking about training, not actually swimming, but if they survive that difficulty, then no way they're going to get back in that water again, right? And if we relate that back to sales training, the medium that people are often taught misses the context of the job that they actually have to do. And if that's entirely internally, often it's completely missed. If it's through like sales training from like an external company, or if it's from an understanding the buyer, it's driven from some made up personas, right? Like it's kind of partially there, but it's not fully there. And then the really important bit is when you get in the water, you need to know that that help is there to not only guide you in not getting into trouble, but so that if you do get into some kind of challenge, you're going to get constructive help, right? You're not just going to have someone yelling at you. And that's really the approach that we take is if you strip back all of the complexities about sales, right? Like, because sales fundamentally is complex, but if you just distill it down to like the simplest thing possible, in my opinion, it's know who you're talking to, know what they care about, and know why they care about it. And interestingly, none of those three things have anything to do with what you sell, right? And if you're talking to the right person, right, and you know those three things, and you can validate those three things, then you can probably help them. So, like, hence the right person. And yet, what we find is that the vast majority of sales training is step 4 onwards, not those three. And what happens, at least our hypothesis on it, is then you tell somebody you need to go and roll out XYZ change, right? But they don't have the context and it doesn't feel like the kind of conversations they have in real life, right? And I'm not talking role play in general, just like let's take like like a qualification framework like medic, right? Which is very trendy for the last couple of years, right? If you're just taught medic and you're just told what those letters mean and given some examples of questions to ask to get there and just given a checklist, right? Or forced approaching the CRM, it doesn't feel real. It feels awkward. It feels stale. It feels unnatural to what you currently say and how you currently speak. So the barrier to actually use that in real life is enormous, right? Whereas if you're taught medic in the context of an actual conversation that is with a human, an AI, whatever, that actually represents your customer and knows your customer's challenge, right? Let's take the identify pain component, right? The more that feels real in the way that you're being taught what it is, the more it's going to naturally be in the back of your head when you're back on a real call, right? And then it feels more natural to say it and to try it. So confidence, ironically, right? Lisa, you mentioned about measuring confidence earlier. Confidence that comes from context, we think is the missing link. And everyone thinks it's about practice, thinks it's about feedback, thinks it's about measurement, but like those are all still like they're not the problem behind the problem. We think it needs to be so obvious that doing A instead of B will lead to better outcomes for both you and your buyer, that you just do it. And that's where we come in, right? So marketeers can't model personas as much as they try. If they could, by the time they've done 3 months of research, it's all outdated and irrelevant. AI can effectively eat the internet of every single thing that your buyers actually said, right? So what we do is we take a selection of your target buyers, every post, every comment on other people's posts that they've made, every word on their profile, every word of every podcast episode and a podcast that they speak on or that is topically relevant to their role. And then all of your existing buyer persona knowledge and context, right? So we're not wasting that research that you've done. And then a bunch of other stuff. And we build these really high context AI representations of your buyer. That would be completely impossible for a marketing team to put on a slide or for a manager pretending to be a buyer in a role play to effectively get across. And the outcome is that when you're learning what they care about, you're actually learning what your buyers care about. And when you practice with one of these things, it's very, very, very similar to a real conversation. So when you are in the real world, it's just another conversation. It's just another call, whether you're on Replicate Labs, Value Coach AI, or speaking to Joe Blogs, right, who's a marketing director at XYZ Corp. If all of it is the same, there is no transition. It just kind of works, right? Does that make sense?
It does, James. So James, going back to, you talked about, in sales training, we don't focus on the persona. I don't mean to disagree with you, but not, you're right in a way that a lot of methodologies are all about how do we sell people and how do we have sales techniques. Our point of view is, and maybe it's just a 1% pivot, is no one freaking wants to be sold. The reality is people buy. And so I'm with you in the part of, we really need to understand, who are we selling to? What are they going through? What's their business challenges? What are their problems they're running into? First and foremost, so we can have a dialogue to see if we can actually help them. Either we help them and they can be they're qualified, we can bring them into the mix, or we can't. And they're not a good mix at this time for whatever reason. And we're transparent about it. And I know other methodologies talk about that as well, but James, you hit on something about, marketing spending time, and I've seen it over and over again. Marketing and other organizations, I mean, they will spend a huge amount of time and effort, define a persona, do all this work, come out with the book. This is the book. Problem, tomorrow it's a day old. A week from now, it's a week old. A month from now, what book are you talking about? We hire new people. Did you read the book? What book? Oh, this is totally out of date. So, James, how does your platform, so it sounds like your platform on one hand helps me create the persona, which is awesome, right? I can look at different sources and create a real buyer persona that's up to date. How does it maintain it over time? Because if I look at, let's say 20 different Google, LinkedIn profiles today and what they talked about today, 6 months from now, the market changes. Like, you look at the AI space, man, it seems to change every week. So how does your platform allow you to keep it up to date so it's relevant at this point in time?
Yeah, the people don't like being sold to, but they buy is spot on. I think to minify that down, cold calls is something that's always a controversial topic. But the classic layout of the cold call is, once someone agrees to let you talk to them, you're meant to make a statement, right? Other VP marketings that I've worked with care about X. Is that something that's top of mind for you, right? And that's a major point of failure in cold calls. If you look at any statistics breakdown from any of the big, contact providers, for example. So, and at that point, you don't know them, right? So making sure that you're talking about something that is actually situationally relevant means, fundamentally, if I have that problem and I haven't figured out a solution for it, then I'm probably going to let you keep talking to me, right? So perfect example of what you were saying. And you're right, persona is, I don't know the literal like Oxford Dictionary definition, right? But I'm assuming it's derived from person, right? As in individual human. And people change their minds, right? So people change their minds, not just their motivations, but also the market changes. And I think with AI in particular, if someone posts on LinkedIn and says, like, I bet you, if someone big enough with a big enough following posted something on LinkedIn that said, I have problem X and I can't find a solution for it, by Monday morning, someone's built a solution for it and tried to pitch it to them, right? Like the reality is that
Yeah, like Richard Branson.
yeah, but the pace of innovation is so rapid now that
Yeah.
even the problems your clients had 6 months ago, even if they're still problems, the way that they would talk about them have changed, right? Maybe even a week ago, maybe even yesterday. So our system is mainly using real time information. So people post on LinkedIn over time, right? People do podcasts, they don't do one and never do another one, right? So they do them over time. And we can even connect to tools like like Dong and Salesloft, right, where your actual real customer conversations obviously over time are evolving and the reactions that you're getting are changing. So we update the system every single day. So if you have a persona of a CHRO and between today and tomorrow the fundamental role of a CHRO changes, or the top of mind challenges change, or the landscape of a solution to a problem that was previously unsolvable changes, when the rep logs in tomorrow, they're talking to the latest version, right? That's actually up to date. Um, and again, like, marketing do a lot of really good research, and some of that is evergreen, and that, like, institutional knowledge should feed into it. So you can add static information as well, but you don't sell to that. You sell to the burning problem, the hell on fire moment I have right now today, right? So we update it every single day.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, Carlos used the example, like, even if we looked 5 years ago, not nearly as many executives were talking about AI. Or if you look at, everyone's priorities right before March 2020 versus right after, everything shifts. So it's interesting that you're keeping it up to date that way. And I love the idea. So around the safe space. So you're getting as realistic a call opportunity to practice here as possible. And if you crash and burn, it doesn't mean you lost a deal. It doesn't mean you lost a prospect. It means you're going to get feedback from the AI on why you crashed and burned. So I love that. As somebody, I hired SDRs my whole career, and a lot of them, it was their first like real office job, and that was the hardest thing. I used to pull lead lists that I knew were trash because I was like, all right, just call this trash because you need it, it is something you just get better at by doing. Unfortunately, like that's the whole reality behind cold calling is you get more comfortable the more you do it. And you get more natural the more you do it. And so it would be like, here's a list of garbage, go call it because it doesn't matter if you screw it up. But this is like such a better idea. Now, I guess where I'm curious, and in full disclosure for the listeners, we have partnered with James and Replicate Labs at Value Selling to create what we're calling Value Coach AI, and it's really exciting. And frankly, at this point, haven't had a ton of time to play around with it. I have like 2 full days blocked as soon as I'm done with all these workshops to do that because I'm really excited about it. But I'm curious now because we put this in the hands of our clients now. What is going to make them use it? Because I feel like we're still in that place of like, here, we're enabling you with another tool. And yes, it's amazing. How do we make sure people log in? How do we make sure people are accountable to actually doing those calls?
It's a good question. I would say that firstly, what Replicate Labs is a platform that's configurable, and it's designed so that you can pair it up with your methodologies, with your frameworks, with your personas, with what best looks like. So out of the box, there's a bit of a lift, right, to make something like that viable. I think the difference between that and Value Coach AI, which isn't just your logo stuck on our products, right, is that the whole thing is deeply trained on your rubrics, your methodology, your frameworks, your definition of what good looks like. And then it seamlessly sounds super salesy. It plugs in sounds super salesy to your buyer's environment, right? So straight away you've got this kind of, I mean, I mentioned it when we went through sales training a few years ago. Like, you get the point of the workshop, and then there's the what happens next, right? And being able to instantaneously kind of merge those two worlds together, right? Of this information I was just given and my actual reality that is my buyers, my personas in context, speaks like them, all that kind of stuff. And it's a really nice kind of transition point. So firstly, I think that, if somebody is using this to improve adoption, improve compliance of a methodology, like because it's tied to a compelling event, it's naturally a bit stickier. The next I'd say is what we see in the data that's different to sales tools that I've certainly bought before as a go-to-market leader is when somebody tries this once, they get hooked, right? Like if you go and watch back a call recording, that's cool. It might be useful. If your manager, it might be very useful, but it's not like that's going to materially kind of change my effectiveness, right? If you go and do like we had a call earlier today, where the prospect genuinely said that the feedback and the advice that they got from the platform was better than they give to their own reps, right?
Nice.
And we're not at singularity level yet, right? But the reality is that when you're rolling out a methodology, the person giving the feedback is typically somebody that also just learned the methodology, right? So there's going to be natural limitations to the depth that they can give to. So with Value Coach, for example, there's people on the value selling side that have tried it completely authentically in an environment, score 70% on a role play, complain, this must be wrong, right? And then look at the actual feedback and like, actually, that's really useful. And when a rep goes through that experience, and it also, to our earlier points, sounds like their buyer, it's so top of mind when they go out into the real world. And as soon as you get one loop, right? If I practiced, I learned something, I used it in real life and I got a better outcome, you get adoption, right? Because you start to immediately correlate using this product, which isn't even like the point, right? You start to immediately correlate practice with your buyer, right? To making more money, being more efficient, giving my buyer a better experience, helping them more, right? Whatever your reason, right? Your motivation is for being. And then you get into that loop. So that's one thing. And that's with the current technology. We also should consider where this is going to go, right? So you don't interact with your buyer in real life by going to a new tab and going to this dedicated tool in the same way that like the reason often like adoption of using collateral for go-to-market is challenging because you have to go and look for it, right? You have to leave your world. We see a major opportunity to get more into the workflow. And one of the things that Value Coach AI does that Replicate Labs currently doesn't do is it writes discovery questions for you. So it takes the buyer, takes the product, takes the context from the persona and takes the framework and applies that to, in your case, give OPC questions for the different components of a value prompter. And imagine if we could connect to your calendar and 20 minutes before every discovery call you had, email you some dedicated questions, right? So that we go away from the world of, tell me what your buying process is, right? To, all right, tell me the last time you bought a sales coaching product, like how did that play out, right? And just like those simple changes that just make everything more authentic, getting into the workflow, putting it into a place where the rep already is at the point in time that they need it with the context of those massive complex models, right? Those kind of things. And there's 50 different ideas that we have for how to do that. That's where we think like real adoption is going to come.
James, that's awesome. It's funny. I got a new note-taking tool and it has this, instead of it being, hey, I have the conversation, call ends, and then it says, man, you really sucked at that conversation. Which I call like, it's like, it's like a pilot running a checklist as he's upside down in a tree going, well, we crashed. Let's figure out why. This to at least gives me some feedback as I'm having the call. So for one of them, it's talk time. So as the call's going on, either I'm not talking enough or I'm talking too much. It'll give me a percentage of talk time. And I think just that little, tidbit helps. So anything we could do to help someone during the call be more effective in a non-invasive way is awesome. But I want to circle back. So today, the product allows me to create these personas based on either stagnant information that we have that we created or outside sources like podcasts, LinkedIn, taking LinkedIn profiles of, hey, here's 25 other buyers that would be just like them, right? And create real-time personas that constantly get updated. So that's like part A. Part B, I can then use that persona through your platform to actually practice that conversation, that early discovery call, that prospecting call in a safe environment, which it then scores and gives me real world feedback. Let's call it part 3 so that I can take it to heart. So it's not like, hey, I'm going to go listen to my gong call. Yeah, this is boring and I hate my voice. It's more of, hey, you had the call. Let me tell you what you did and areas that you can improve on. And you can literally go back to those areas and re-listen to them. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the way that we would describe it is so that there's multiple stages, but like if we just put it into two buckets, and the order is important. The first thing you have to do is learn how your buyers think, and then when you know that, you have to learn how to talk to them. And if you can do those two things, you're probably going to win,
Okay.
right?
I
So
like
so
that.
that's the flow, right? Research, understand, ask questions, no sales environment, ask as blunt, as detailed, as specific questions as you want, figure out what they think, and obviously how that's going to relate, form a hypothesis, then go into, okay, how do I actually talk about that? And of course, that's going to contain your practice, your real world, your feedback, the scoring, all of that kind of stuff.
And then in the tool today, as I mock out these calls, it'll literally fill out a value prompter, which is our, basically our framework within value selling, and kind of tell you, hey, here's where the conversation you had. But when if I got it right, I could literally feed it a live call that I did do over Gong or whatever platform I pick. And it'll also parse that thing out and tell it, hey, here's the areas that you covered so far. Is that right so far?
You can connect to Gong or SalesLoft, which also has a CI capability, and you can pull in every single call that you do every day and automatically run it through and get all the feedback and scoring.
Nice. I love that. Now the future is, hey, giving real-time feedback while I'm having the calls. And I think that's going to be awesome. I'm lost for words because, people talked about it. I know we worked with you and kind of helping you set it all up. When I finally saw the end result, I was speechless. I go, this is so much more than I thought it would be. Because I think, the problem with other platforms I've seen it, first off, it's way too hard to create the persona. So that's too much of a lift. Two, it's too hard to keep it up. So it becomes stale and old and who cares? And then third, the fact that it feels so lifelike when you do the practices, that I think it's awesome. I have an account that, it's funny you mentioned earlier. They go, yeah, we're using this, Carlos. We're all in. And then we go, oh, great. So we just put the fields in Salesforce, just fill them out. Oh, I mean, that's unnatural. I mean, you know how it goes. Nobody wants. So are you using it or are you not? Because, writing the customer's, responses back to Salesforce should not be a big deal. If you're already using it, they got this cool little feature. It's called copy paste. But if you're really not using it, it's a much different conversation.
I think that like all of this stuff is, as it's, someone at Value Selling said that like Value Coach has taken the whole concept of like sales technology, right? Like coaching technology, that kind of stuff, from superficial to useful, right? Because I've quoted that a lot of times, anonymously, of course, but we all know who it was. But like I think that it's a really important point, right? Is you're only like, let me put it this way: it doesn't matter what technology you have, what sales framework you have, what like validation exists in your CRM, what your CRO says. If you don't want to learn, you won't learn, right? And
So
like
true.
we're doing this for people that do want to actually materially get better. And like dog fooding is always a term that I find hilarious in tech, right? But so using your own product, but I genuinely use this. Like I use Replicate Labs every day. And a week ago, we actually completely changed the way that we do discovery calls. Completely changed it. And it materially, I won't share the actual numbers, but it materially changed the conversion from first meeting to moving into like active pipeline, like double
Nice.
digit change.
That's
And
awesome.
those are the kind of things that, like, if you don't think like really seriously about how you want to change behaviors and why you want to change them and being buyer forward and all that kind of stuff, like getting a double digit % change in any part of your funnel is going to take you years and probably require quite a lot of luck. So I think that tech is now catching up to that point where it can be like materially useful, but that desire still needs to ultimately be there.
But what gave you the data to figure out what the change should be? Because it's one thing you go, hey, I need to change because I'm not getting the results I want. It's another one that go, well, what should the change be?
Yeah, we were finding that we were getting a lot of, I refer to it as window shopping, and for an embarrassingly long time, I thought it was normal part of an early stage startup, right? Where you have these meetings that are like over the top positive, like an extreme level of positive reaction from the prospect, where you discuss next steps and all that kind of stuff. But you don't quite lock down that next meeting, and the ghosting rate was absolutely enormous. So you'd come off this meeting and like I'd like slack my team and be like, oh my God, just had this phenomenal meeting.
They
Like,
love us.
yeah, and then literally never hear from them again. And so we ripped apart what we were doing, right? We looked at how we were booking it, why they were booking it, how the discovery process works, right? Like, did we show them product? If yes, what did we show them? What did the follow-up email look like? And then we went and did what human beings do, right? And we asked other human beings, and we went to experts and people that we knew and respected. I went to some people at Value Selling. I went to some ex-colleagues. I went to our advisors. And then we built a hypothesis of what it might be. And then I went back to my product and I practiced it. And I practiced it with not what I was told, but I practiced it with the language of my buyer, right? With the approach that I got from all of that collective feedback. And then when I was confident, I took it to real customers. And like, it was literally like, I've worked in sales enablement and go to market for a long time. Like, I can't oversell how much of a 72-hour transformation it was to our business.
Awesome.
And I think that, like, ultimately by bottling up that confidence and being able to practice it in context, I think it makes a big difference. And yeah, if we can do that as a small business, then the transformative power of that for a larger company, right, is really quite kind of terrifying in all the right ways. So yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not just we think it works. It sounds like it works.
Oh, it works.
So we know it works. Just be confident, James. Awesome. Well, I think we could easily go on and on all day because we've got so many questions about this, but this was such a great start, James. Thank you so much. If people wanted to get in touch with you, I know, so the website, folks, is replicatelabs.ai. James, to get in touch with yourself, what's your preferred method of communication?
Definitely LinkedIn. Practically, if I'm not on a call, I'm probably on LinkedIn. The only social media advice I have. So yeah.
It's great advice. There's a huge network of people out there. That's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, James, again, for taking the time today. We know it's a little later in your day on a Friday, but thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. It's been great. Thank you both.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. Please check us out at www.b2brevexec.com. Share this episode with your friends, your family, your kids, your dogs. And if you like what you hear, you can subscribe through YouTube, Google Podcasts, and really Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you really like what you hear, you can leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. I am Lisa Schneier. I'm joined by my ever-charming podcast partner, Carlos Noche. And until next time, we wish you nothing but the greatest success.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.